Today, we're going to be talking about how to create, design, and develop video games. When you're designing a video game, it takes three requirements of knowledge. One, you have to know how to create assets. Assets are, for example, sprites, scenes, and sound effects. Number two, you have to know how to use the engine or framework you have chosen. Engines or framework are examples like Snap or Scratch, or programming engines like Unreal Engine 4 or Unity 5. And then number three, you have to know how to write the code that will make your game run. So why learn about game design? Well, there's lots of reasons. So there's a lot of career options in game design, as we're going to go over. There's lots of special skills that are needed to just create one game. And in game design, as many as 1,000 people can be working on creating just one game. So talking about the skills, there's lots of skills. So here's a video showcasing some of them.
Here's a list of the many practical skills you'll need if you want to be a game designer. 1. A high level of technical writing skill. That's technical, not creative writing skill. I'm talking about grammar, spelling, and punctuation here. I'm sure this isn't a problem for most of you, but for some of you, well, like I said, we do read the emails. 2. A solid grounding in logic. 3. Some basic psychology. 4. Understanding the medium you're working in. You're going to be building electronic games, so learning the fundamentals of how a computer works would be a good idea. 5. A solid grasp of mathematics, at least through advanced algebra. Those skills will prepare you to be a decent game designer. Now, if you want to be a really good game designer, you'll also need 1. A thorough knowledge of literature, philosophy, and myth. 2. An understanding of world religions. 3. Basic scripting and programming ability. 4. An understanding of art principles. You don't have to be a great artist, but you do need to understand art. If you happen to be able to sketch or throw together a collage in Photoshop, so much the better. 5. An understanding of basic audio design and musical principles. If you haven't already, go pick up an instrument. It's good for the soul anyway. 6. A practical knowledge of graphic design. 7. A thorough internal library of games to reference. This is where having played a lot of games will help you. The more games and genres you've experienced, the more you'll have to draw from. But most of all, you'll need life experience. As a designer, you are crafting experiences. You cannot do this without having some yourself. Knowing all about video games, anime, or the Star Wars expanded universe isn't going to cut it. Go live. A well-balanced, well-examined life will make you a great designer. Last and most obvious of all, make games. If you aren't sure where to begin, you can always start with pen and paper games, things you can put together out of chit and poster board. Or if you're dead set on jumping right into electronic games, we recommend Game Maker for the PC owners, or Game Salad if you got a Mac. Both of these programs are free, have a low barrier to entry, and will teach you the logic of a computer without expecting you to already have a lot of programming knowledge. Be brave, be bold, create.
One of the game design areas is programmers. So programmers build the game by creating different codes for different parts of the game. For everything such as character design to settings of the game to the background, the programmer will have created the special code. For example, a programmer will have created a code that allows a football player to kick the ball when you press a certain button. The game designers, they work on ideas for games. So how the game will work and the rules of the game. Part of the game design is game artists and animators. So game artists draw all the characters and settings in the game, and the game animators make them move. Most settings and characters you see in the game have been hand-drawn or drawn on the computer. And so that's where we come into Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Animate as special skills. You have graphic designers. So the graphic designers make everything look good. So they'll take everything that the animator or the artist has given, and they'll improve on their designs. They will ensure that any pictures or text look good together and then fit the theme of the game. Other careers in game design are producers, game testers, yes, that's a real job, the graphic user interface designers, the writers, the sound designers, and the composers. So what makes a game? So I'm going to put a little video here. Watch this little intro. And so when you're watching this intro, think about the game has to have some type of rules. Games often have a goal or lots of little goals, and games can have an abstract or a closer to reality.
The first thing you're going to want to be careful about is scope. Many people pick up a game engine dreaming of making the types of games they play. Unfortunately, this often just is not possible. Games like God of War or Final Fantasy are made by teams of at least 40 people, sometimes way more than 40 people, over the course of several years. Even if you're just amazing and you throw your whole life into creating your game, you're not gonna make a God of War or a Final Fantasy. Not even close, and especially not on your first attempt. Truth is, you're not even going to create something like Super Mario Bros. As your first game. You may create like 1 level's worth of Super Mario Bros., but even that's kind of pushing it. Your goal with your first game should be to get something built that you can actually play, even in the most rudimentary fashion, as soon as possible. Think of your first game as a learning exercise, not your masterwork. If you start with a huge project, you'll find that you don't even know where to begin, and you'll get bogged down doing little bits and pieces that have no tangible result, and it'll seem like you're not making any progress at all, and you'll hit roadblocks that you don't know how to overcome, simply to be left flailing for what to even work on next. Trust me, keep it simple. If your first attempt at making a game turns out to be a one-room platformer with bad collision that you took 3 weeks to build, be proud of that because you built it. You actually got it done. You made a game. That's more than most people ever manage. So play it and show it to your friends. And don't worry when they don't understand it or are critical because they're still thinking in terms of the big budget games they're used to playing. You know how much work went into making that game, and more importantly, you know that next time you'll be able to do it even better and faster. Soon, you'll be building games that people are asking you to let them play. Second thing to keep in mind, and I know this is going to sound weird, but don't go into your first game with a specific idea. Learn what you can do and design around that. Don't lock yourself into an idea and beat your head against it for weeks or months. Instead, learn a few tricks, watch a few tutorials, then start working towards something you're pretty sure you can build. It's okay if there are still a few parts of it you have no idea how to even start to do, but make sure it's only a few parts when you're breaking your project down and planning things out. Which, of course, brings us to tutorials. Any major engine has tons of people who happily make tutorials about pretty much everything. Go find them, watch them, study them. Then, if you're stuck or if you can't find an answer to your question, just ask. You'd be shocked at how many people are happy to help you through things if you just post on a forum or throw your thoughts onto the message boards. And don't be afraid of coding. Lots of people say they can't code, but if you design your game right, you would be shocked at how little coding you actually have to do to get something done. It's a small enough amount that any of you out there watching this right now can handle it. One of the big ones. Design your game around your skills. Part of understanding your scope is understanding your resources, and in this case, you are your resources. Are you a great artist, but you've never coded in your life? In that case, have your game lean on your art skills while pushing you just enough on the code side that you learn some new things. Are you somebody who can't draw or model or animate? That's alright. There are plenty of games out there that get away with what you'd call minimal graphics. Accept that and embrace it as part of your design. Constraints force us to be creative. It's gonna be a struggle at first, no question. I wish I had more comforting words for you, but all I can say is that most things worth doing are a struggle. And if you stick with it, maybe one day you'll have the option to make games instead of having to do all that other stuff. But that's it for the basics.
So designing a game, the first thing that you have to do is kind of do a little market research. So this is where you're going to discover the types of games that are in high demand. Ask questions about the types of game your friends like to play or decide on what game you want to create. This is also going to show if your game has already been created. So maybe you have a fantastic idea of a new game, but then after you do a little bit of market research, you figure out that it's already been designed and they've taken all your ideas. The next thing you're going to do is the planning. So this is where you have to ask some questions. So what makes a game fun? We have to think about how can we use design and thinking to innovate the games, right? So maybe there is a game that's designed and maybe you have an idea on how to make it better. How can we utilize feedback to improve a design? And then how do game designers use game mechanics? How do you change the movement of your characters? How do you change the way that their characters shoot or jump? There's also some understanding that you need to have. So design thinking is a mental model, right? It uses rapid prototyping with multiple iterations. So you have to understand how those different characters are going to interact with the other characters of the game. Understanding that design thinking is a mental model that can be applied to everyday challenges. So when you're thinking about computer games, they normally have a story, right? In game design, the word story has a fancy word. It's called a narrative. There are 3 different types of narratives. You have an embedded narrative, you have an emergent narrative, and you have a narrative element. So let's find out what these types of narratives mean. So the first one is the embedded narrative. This is where you cannot change the story or results of the game that you are playing. The next is the emergent narrative. This is where you can change the story as you play the game. You might have control over certain parts of the game, or your actions affect the outcome. And the last is the narrative elements. This is where you may not be much of a story and is normally a quiz or a puzzle type of a game. So you can think about these types of narratives, and you can put them with the types of games that you currently play. So what type of narratives do you like in your games? So that's going to be the first part, right? Thinking about the narrative. Then you're going to be choosing the setting for your game. So when designing a setting, consider the following questions. Will it be set in the real world? Will it be an imaginary setting, or is it a different time period? So are we looking at space? Are we looking at history? Are we looking at current day problems? So characters, when considering characters, think about the following questions. So will the player be the character? Will you have characters to choose from? Will there be a hero or a heroine? And what enemy characters will you include? So these are all things that you need to think about in game design. So as you're designing a new game, we're going to be looking at different thought bubbles, right? Different areas that we can add our thoughts into, and characters is going to be one of them. So other features, here are some other features that you may want to consider when designing your game, right? Maps or level design. So is there going to be multiple levels? Is there going to be multiple maps as you beat one level? Can you go to level 2? The background. So how are your backgrounds set? Is it going to be a stationary background where the shooter is just rotating and enemies are coming in from different directions? Or is it going to be a scrolling game where you're running through a maze? Is it going to be a racing game where you're going to be going through different areas? Is it a board game? Is it a storyboard, right? So as you progress through, there's going to be different stories inside of the game. You have to think about the music and sound effects. You have to think about the puzzle designs or character designs. So all of those are going to be in our video game design process, right? And so this right here, basic elements of game design, is going to help you plan the type of game that you want to make, right? So you're going to look at the space, what it looks like, what it feels like, what barriers or colors or sounds exist. You're going to look at the game description. You're going to look at the components. You're going to look at you have to look at the mechanics, or what actions can the players or components do, right? Or have done to them. You have to think about the goals. Does someone win the game? Or is it just based on score? Or is it just an infinite play game? You have to be specific. And then the rules. So what rules do the players have to follow? Or what rules do the sprites or the mechanics of your projectiles have to follow? You have to think about that. So rules really has to equal logic, right? So we're going to be talking a lot about that. So this is the game design sheet that we're going to be using when we plan out our video games. Or you should have something similar if you're planning out a game on your own. Well, guys, that is all I have. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have questions, please let me know, and I will talk to you guys later.